Our story is similar to many others. We met in college, dated occasionally, and then one day I realized I didn't want to date other girls. I wanted to spend all my time with Mary Beth. Apparently, around the same time, she decided she wanted to spend time with me. We were a steady couple for the rest of college and married 3 months after graduation. Mary Beth never got to put her college education into practice. 3 weeks after the wedding, we found out she was pregnant. She gave birth to Gloria, and 11 months later she had Alexander. She decided she was going to stay home, and I didn't object to that. A year after Alex was born, Melanie was born, and Mary Beth decided that 3 was enough and got her tubes tied. We lived in the house my parents left me in their will. They had died prematurely when a sheriff's deputy involved in a high-speed chase lost control of his patrol car and hit them at full throttle. The house was a 100-year-old farmhouse on 800 acres. The house had been built by my great-grandfather and passed down through the generations. Each generation had added modern touches to it, so even though the outside of the house seemed very old, the inside was quite modern. And there was a large barn and equipment shed on the property, which was actually a large 6-car garage. There were a few other small buildings, such as the dairy barn, which was no longer used as a dairy barn, but was used for storage. The place was free and clear, thanks to the county's decision and my parents' life insurance. I never wanted to be a farmer like my great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my father, so I leased the property to the Martins, who were our neighbors to the south. The closest I came to farming or ranching was when I kept horses. At one time, we had 5 of them. Me, Mary Beth, and each of the children had one. When the kids left, we sold them, but we still have 2 that Mary Beth and I ride. We put all 3 kids through college, and now they are all married and living away from home. Mary Beth never had to work unless she wanted to, and she never did until the last child left for college, and then she decided she wanted to work. She decided she wanted to be a nurse and went back to school to get her nursing degree. She worked as a nurse for several years before she realized that she couldn't stand being around sick people all the time. Mary Beth never needed anything. Clothes, jewelry, a car, you name it, and if she wanted it, I gave it to her. We had what I consider to be a good, solid relationship. We made love often, and it was always exciting. She is a very beautiful woman, and I always showered her with compliments, attention, love, and affection, all of which makes what happened so hard to understand. Next chapter. It was Tuesday, and after breakfast, Mary Beth and I had a cup of coffee on the patio and talked about what the day had in store for us. Mary Beth said she was going to go into town and buy groceries, and other than taking care of the horses, she didn't plan to do anything else. All that awaited me was another day at the office. I drove toward town, and as I pulled onto the railroad tracks about a mile south of town, I found a stopped train blocking the crossing. I sat there for about 15 minutes and then got out of my pickup and headed toward the crossing to find out what was wrong. I found a guy checking the coupling between 2 boxcars and asked him what was going on. A train had hit a cow, and they were waiting for the sheriff, and he was apparently on the other side of the county. They couldn't move until he arrived. I got back in my truck, turned around, and drove back home. When I got home, I went into the house and Mary Beth wasn't there. Her car was still parked where it was, so I figured she was in the barn taking care of the horses. The barn is about 200 yards from the house, and I headed toward it. As I approached the barn, I saw the tail end of a pickup truck. It was my friend Mike's truck, and I wondered what he was doing behind my barn at this time of day. I went down behind the shed and checked it out, and sure enough, it was Mike's truck. The door to the stall was right there. I opened it and went inside. As soon as I was in the room, I heard the woman's voices. I quietly moved over to where I could look into the barn itself, from where I could see in, and what I saw ruined my whole day. Mary Beth was with Mike, and it was clear what they were doing. I could feel the heat building up inside me. I wanted to get a deer rifle and destroy them both. I noticed a hay fork hanging on the wall and smiled at the mere thought. I was already reaching for the pitchfork when I remembered what had happened to Bill Miglio. He got life without parole. I didn't want that. I'd make Mike and Mary Beth pay, but I'd plan it so I wouldn't go to jail. I turned and walked out of the barn, and on my way out the door, I noticed the water hose that Mary Beth used to fill the horses with water. On a whim, I took it, inserted it into the fill tube of Mike's gas tank, and turned on the water. I filled the tank, turned the water off. Then, after cooling off a bit, I went back to the barn. I got out, got in my truck, and drove to work. The train was gone. I walked into work and explained my absence, to which I was told that they already knew about the train and figured that was why I wasn't there. After work, I headed home, and on the way, I passed a tow truck that was towing Mike's truck. I laughed and thought, this is just the beginning, asshole, just the beginning. I spent the rest of the drive home thinking about what to do about Mary Beth. She had to pay. I wouldn't be able to rest until I made her pay. Driving up to the house, I forced myself to act normal around this cheating whore. At dinner, I asked Mary Beth if she had talked to Alice, Mike's wife, lately. Why? About what? Why do you ask that? Just curious. We've often invited her and Mike over to our place, but I haven't seen her in a while. I was just wondering if something happened. Did something happen between you two that I don't know about? I saw something flash across her face as she replied, no. I actually talked to her this afternoon. She told me that someone damaged Mike's truck by pouring water in the gas tank. Maybe he got caught entertaining someone's wife? Mary Beth got an amused look on her face, and I continued. Rumor has it that Mike is having fun with some whore and has picked up an STD. At this point, Mary Beth turned pale, and I walked out of the kitchen. I laughed to myself and headed to the barn to work on the 30-year-old John Deere I was restoring. I worked on it for a couple hours and then went back to the house. Mary Beth was in the living room, and I could hear her on the phone, so I quietly moved over to where I could listen. Are you absolutely sure? Damn it, Mike, if you have something, you gave it to me, and I'll end up giving it to Ralph. Once that happens, he'll know, and then God help us. And how did these rumors come about? Are you bragging about making me? No, I don't want to stop, but I want to be safe. Okay, same time. I'll see you then. I walked into the room just as she hung up the phone. That was Alice. Mike's truck has been fixed. I asked if they wanted to come over for a barbecue on Saturday. She said she'd check with Mike. Is that okay with you? Great, I said, and went into the kitchen to get a beer. I drank the beer and thought about Mary Beth. She was going to be put out on the street very soon, but I wanted revenge first. And Mike was going to get hurt too. Next chapter. Late that night, Mary Beth called me and asked if we could go out for dinner and drinks. I figured why not? If I was lucky, I wouldn't find another source. Usually when we go into town, Alice and Mike join us. Mary Beth said she thought it would be a good idea if it was just the two of us. When we walked into Dusty's and headed to our usual table, we found Alice and Mike already sitting there. Seeing the looks that Mary Beth and Mike exchanged, I just smiled and pretended not to realize who they thought I was. We joined them, sitting and talking until the band tuned up and started playing. I noticed that Mike was drinking more than usual and wondered if he felt guilty for sitting there looking at me. I also noticed the looks exchanged between Mary Beth and Mike. Bob and Mary Hopkins joined us, and that eased the tension a bit. A nice, slow tune started playing, and Alice tried to ask Mike to dance with her, but Mike said he didn't feel like dancing. Mary Beth suggested that I dance with Alice, and I got up and led her out onto the parquet. I figured that offering to dance with Alice was Mary Beth's way of getting Alice and me out of the way so she could talk to Mike. I guess I was right, because a minute later I saw the two of them on the other end of the parquet. I wondered how clueless Mike and Mary Beth thought I was. For the next 2 hours, Mary Beth danced with Mike about twice for every time she danced with me. I didn't care because I knew something they both didn't, which was that they would both pay for their actions, and it would happen sooner rather than later. Besides, it wasn't hard to dance with Alice. When Mary Beth and Mike left, I thought I might pay a little attention to Alice. Mary Beth wanted to leave about a half hour before last call, so I headed to the bathroom to wash up before heading home. Mike was in the bathroom, more than a little drunk, and he was running around with a couple of other guys. I did my business and left. As we drove home, I told Mary Beth that Mike was in the bathroom complaining to Maury Phillips that there was a woman he wanted to take out to the parking lot and entertain, but her husband and Alice were there, so he couldn't. I jokingly asked him if he would share if I distracted her husband and Alice. He just laughed and said the woman was a whore. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed how Mary Beth's face changed as she thought about what her lover might have said about her when he was drunk. Hopefully, I was on my way to poisoning the well. Next chapter. I talked to my lawyer on Wednesday, and he told me that I would need hard evidence if I was going to divorce Mary Beth because of adultery. We have a guilt-free state, but local judges have been known to take a tough stance on the adulterous party. On Thursday, as I was getting ready for work, Mary Beth reminded me that she was going to visit her cousin and might be late getting home. I told her I remembered. I had arranged an afternoon swap with one of the guys, so when I left the house to go to work, I drove to the back of the lot and parked so that there was a bunch of trees between me and the house. I got to the barn and entered the stall. There are stairs from the changing room to the hayloft, so I went up to the hayloft and positioned myself so I could see the house, get a good view of what was going on in the barn, and not be seen. It was a long wait, and I was beginning to wonder if I had miscalculated, when suddenly, about 11 o'clock, I saw Mary Beth heading toward the barn. I always arrive early and let the horses out of the barn and into the corral. When Mary Beth comes downstairs, they go to her because they know she is going to feed them. She gave them some oats, and then she swept out their stalls. After that, she spread 4 bales of hay, spread a blanket on them. I heard a truck pull up behind the barn. I turned on the video camera and waited. Mike went into the barn, approached Mary Beth, and then they started having fun. I had enough evidence, so I turned off the camera and quietly went back down to the stable. As I slipped out of the locker room, I noticed the water hose and just couldn't resist. It might make him wonder about his truck not running after his visits to Mary Beth, but so what? Let him wonder if I'm following him. Make him start looking over his shoulder. I drove into town, had a couple beers to kill time, and then headed home, arriving at the usual time. I grabbed a snack and sat down to watch TV. Mary Beth got home around 8 and told me she wanted to go to bed early. On Friday, on my way to work, I dropped off the videotape at the lawyer's office and made the necessary plans to ruin Mary Beth's day on Sunday morning. When I got home, Mary Beth was all worked up again, and I wondered if Mike had stopped by again. I wondered when the guy was working. Whatever. I gave Mary Beth what she wanted, and then we had a late dinner and watched TV. When we went to bed, she wanted to go out again, and I didn't discourage her. I had to work every third Saturday, and today was my work Saturday. As I got ready to leave for work, Mary Beth reminded me that we were going out with Mike and Alice tonight, and they were coming to pick us up at 6:30. I told her I remembered and left the house. When I got home, Mary Beth was already dressed and ready to go out. And Mike and Alice showed up right after I had showered and changed. Mary Beth was fussing around trying to get us out of the house, but I told her to slow down. I told them that I needed them to come into the room so I could show them the funny video I had made earlier that day. They came into the room and I told Mary Beth to press play on the VCR. The video was very clear, and Mary Beth turned very red. Mike turned pale and Alice was stunned. I just stood there and watched. Alice came to her senses first, and with a cry of, "You rotten son of a bitch," she kicked Mike in the balls with her knee and then said, "You're not coming with me in the car. You can walk home for all I care, and don't be surprised if when you get home all the doors are locked." She hopped out of the house and I grabbed Mike by the collar of his shirt, pulled him to the front door, and pushed him outside. Mary Beth followed me, and when I closed the door, she said, "I think we need to talk. We can do it in the living room." I sat down in a cushioned chair across from Mary Beth, who was sitting on the couch, and told her, "I'm filing for divorce, using adultery as grounds, and I want you out of the house. You have until Monday to pack your things and leave." "I'm not going anywhere." "Do you really want to divorce me?" "Absolutely." "Are you going to tell me you don't love me?" No, I can't tell you that. I love you, but I can't live with you anymore. Not after what you did to Mike. Well, I love you, and you're stuck with me. Only a fool would turn that down, she said, standing up. I'll wait for you in the bedroom. She had a long wait ahead of her. I slept on the couch and made plans to move her stuff out of the house, and once all her stuff was out, she would leave, even if I had to pick it up and carry it out. As I fell asleep, I thought about Amber and pondered what an acceptable waiting period should be. In the morning, I was in the kitchen making coffee when Mary Beth walked into the kitchen. You didn't go to bed last night. Slept on the couch. You're not going to divorce me because I entertain myself at my leisure, are you? Of course I'm going to. You're not thinking straight, dear. This is a no-fault state, and you know as well as I do that in a divorce, I'll get half of everything we have. We have nothing, Mary Beth. Everything we had in savings went toward the kids' college tuition. You'll get your car, your clothes, half of your household goods, and your horse. And if you look it up, you'll find that 3 judges in this county have never, ever, ever awarded alimony to a cheating wife. You'll have to sell the farm and give me half. I know you've got your memory blown out, Mary Beth. You've forgotten your wedding vows, and you've also apparently forgotten the prenup you signed when we got married. It releases the family farm from any lawsuits you might file against it. You need to start deciding where you're going to live, Mary Beth, because after that man, I pointed out the window at the car pulling up, is done with you, you're out of here. You bastard! You're not going to get away with this. I'll hire a lawyer and we'll get this prenup dissolved. You can spend all the money you don't have on a lawyer if you want, but I'll tell you right now that it won't do you any good. We'll see about that. The doorbell rang, and I went to answer it. I opened the door for Bill Newbert and wished him a good morning. He walked over to Mary Beth, handed her an envelope, and said, Sorry about that, Mary Beth, but you've already been served. He turned and walked away, and I said, Would you like me to help you load your things into the car? Screw you, Ralph. This isn't over. It's certainly not over. I'll take that as a no, I said, and stepped away from her. Mary Beth loaded her clothes into the car while I watched her from the living room window. When she got into the car to leave, she saluted me with one finger and then pulled back. Not 45 minutes later, Mike's wife Alice paid me a visit. She wanted to know if I could get a copy of the tape of Mike and Mary Beth playing in the barn. I was going to try to work with him, but 10 minutes ago Mary Beth called and he left to meet her. I'm done with him. Come in and have a cup of coffee while I make you a copy. She came in and sat down, and I poured her a cup. While she waited, I went into the room and used my dual VCR to make her a copy. When I gave her the copy, she asked what I was going to do. All done. I had her serviced and kicked out of the house sometime before you got here. No hope? Not the slightest. After Alice left, I poured myself another cup of coffee and sat down to my next unpleasant task. I needed to call the kids and let them know what was going on. I'd rather they hear about it from me than from Mary Beth. I was pretty sure that if I left it up to her, she would somehow make me look like the bad guy. I managed to contact Gloria and Melanie, but had to leave a message for them to call me on Alex's answering machine. After dealing with the calls, I called Ryan at Acadia Locks and arranged for him to come over and change all the locks on the house. I couldn't believe that Mary Beth wouldn't visit the house while I was at work and take whatever she wanted. I had done the bank and credit card transaction the day before, knowing when Mary Beth was going to be served. I wasn't completely heartless. I left $1,000 in the checking account for her, but it wasn't enough for long. I went around the house, gathered up everything that belonged to Mary Beth, put it in boxes and bags, and then moved it all into the barn. By the time I was done, Alex called and I told him what was going on. He took it better than the girls did. They wanted to know why I wouldn't try to work things out so I could stay married to their mother, but Alex had been cheated on by several girlfriends, and he guessed how I felt. After talking to Alex, I walked through the kitchen and made a list of what I needed at the store since I would be cooking for myself from now on, and I didn't usually eat like Mary Beth. Not finding anything better, I drove into town and did some shopping. When I got home, Mike's truck was parked outside the house, and Mary Beth was trying to get in the front door. I got out of my pickup and walked up to the porch. "What are you doing here, Mary Beth? You don't live here anymore." "I came to pick up the rest of my stuff, but I can't get into the house." "That's because I changed the locks to keep you out. The rest of your stuff is in bags and boxes in the barn, and you need to move your horse. If she's still here in a week, I'll charge you for boarding. For now, I'd suggest you get in the shit truck, get to the barn, get your stuff, and get off my property. And Mary Beth, stay away." I walked over to Mike's truck, and when he saw me coming, he rolled down the window and locked the door. I had to smile. I leaned over and said, loud enough for him to hear through the glass, "Keep that truck off my property so you'll have enough brains. If you need to bring Mary Beth here for any reason, park in the driveway." Then I smiled broadly and said, "The water hose won't reach that far." I laughed when I saw the realization hit him and the anger on his face. I had to marvel at the boy's cleverness. How could he not have figured this out? His truck runs great when he gets here. He has fun with Mary Beth and leaves, and his truck stops working. He fixes it, goes to her place with no problem, and entertains Mary Beth, and when he leaves, his truck stops working. Yes. The next day at work, I went into the office and told Amber I needed to change some paperwork. I took Mary Beth out of the health insurance and changed the beneficiary on the life insurance provided by the company from Mary Beth to the children. Amber asked why, and I told her I was divorcing Mary Beth. "You're already divorced?" "Yes." "I could use a dance partner at the VFW this Friday." "Then I'm applying for the job." "Are you really going to consider this as a job?" "It's something I'm definitely going to work hard at. I want to do the job well enough to make you want to work with me again." She smiled and said she'd look forward to it, and I left her office in a pretty good mood. I spent my lunch break having fun. I had spent some time the night before making videotapes from the tape I had with Mary Beth and Mike, and I had driven all over town, looking in every gas station and restaurant restroom. I even visited the men's and women's restrooms at Walmart. I taped a picture of Mary Beth with Mike up her ass to every available stall I could find. On the picture I printed, "To have a good time, call Mary Beth at..." There was her cell phone number. Underneath that message I wrote, "If you continue to get a busy signal, call Mike at another phone number to schedule an appointment." Then, pleased with myself, I went back to work. I hadn't been in the office 15 minutes when I got a call from Mary Beth. "Damn you, Ralph. What the hell is going on with you?" "So I wanted to have some fun after 24 years. "So what?" "It didn't mean a damn thing. It was just fun, for Christ's sake. It didn't cost you shit. You got all you could get anyway. Hell, you got more than that. Mike may have gotten something, but you got love. How could you do such a disgusting thing to me? I thought you loved me." "Once upon a time, Mary Beth. Once upon a time. Have fun with your new freedom. Bye." And I hung up. I sat with a wide smile on my face as Amber walked into my office. "Is that a smile for me?" "You bet it is. Just thinking about our Friday night." We made small talk for a couple minutes, and then she gave me some papers to sign, after which we had to get back to work. After work, I stopped by the drop-in for a couple beers, and then headed home to make myself dinner. I was finishing my second long neck when what I hoped would happen happened. Mike walked in, saw me, and headed straight for me. "You rotten son of a bitch," he growled, and then took a swing at me. I didn't try to block the blow. I forced myself to take the blow and then shook myself off and kicked the shit out of Mike. Phil, the owner of the place and the evening's bartender, asked, "What the hell's gotten into you, Ralph? You guys have always been best friends." "I caught him entertaining Mary Beth, and he's pissed because I told his wife and let her see the pictures I took. Can you imagine that? He entertains my wife and I'm the son of a bitch? It's his own damn fault he's lying on the floor. He came in here, he attacked me, and I defended myself. You saw it, Phil. I was sitting there drinking a beer and minding my own business when he came up to me and hit me." "Yeah, I saw that." "Anyway, he was just unlucky that I was still full of anger over what he did, and it kind of fueled my rage when I fought back." Did he really entertain Mary Beth? Has he been in your bathrooms lately? No. I clean them before I open them, but I use a separate restroom in the back of my office. Check the stalls in the public restrooms. I tossed a 10 on the counter and left. Mike was still lying on the floor and groaning when the door closed behind me. He wouldn't be doing Mary Beth any good for a while yet because I kicked him in the balls a couple or 3 times. Needless to say, I was smiling as I drove home. After we met, Mike ended up in the ICU at County Hospital, and I later learned that he blamed Mary Beth for the loss of one of his testicles. Alice kicked him out and used the copy of the tape I gave her to sue him for divorce, using adultery as the grounds. I was very proud of myself. Next chapter. I had a great time with Amber at the VFW dance, and as I was walking her home, she said, "You do know that the only reason I didn't run after you was because you were married, right?" "No, I didn't know that. I do know that there have been times when I've looked at you and wished I was married." "Then let me ask you this. Is this breakup permanent, or are you just going through a crazy fit, and will you reconcile with Mary Beth later?" "There will be no reconciliation. It's over between us, and you can take that to the bank." "Then maybe you'll have dinner with me tomorrow at my house?" "I'll bring wine and dessert." Next chapter. News travels fast in small towns, and at 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, I received a call from Mary Beth. "I see it didn't take you long to replace me." "You haven't been replaced yet, Mary Beth." "I heard you went out with that slut Amber last night." "Now that's a laugh. A slut like you calling Amber a slut." "I'm not a slut." "I can't prove it. Not after I saw you and Mike doing it in the barn." "That was just one time, Ralph. I swear it didn't mean anything. I was just curious what another man might be like. That's all it was." "You're a bad liar, Mary Beth. It wasn't just one time. I saw it twice myself, and I know there were other times because I listened to you talk about it when you were in the barn with him." "Why are you calling Mary Beth? What do you want?" "For you to stop this divorce nonsense so we can be together again." "That's not going to happen, Mary Beth." "Why? Because you're having fun with Amber now?" "I'm not entertaining Amber, at least not yet. I'm not going to do anything that would give you an excuse to countersue, but make no mistake, Mary Beth. I fully intend to try to get Amber into bed as soon as I'm legally rid of you." "That will never happen, Ralph. I'm going to fight for the divorce." "Good luck to you, Mary Beth," and I hung up. I'd had a delightful evening with Amber, and the kiss goodbye as I left made me wiggle my toes. I was looking forward to a relationship with Amber, but I was serious when I told Mary Beth that I wasn't going to do anything that would give her grounds to overturn my lawsuit against her for adultery. Another 2 weeks passed, and several things happened during that time. I met with Amber several times, received 4 very unpleasant calls from Mary Beth over calls, asking her to have a good time, and 1 call from her informing me that she had found an attorney to take her case. "Did he know you didn't have the money to pay him?" "He didn't bother. He said that in cases like mine, the court would no doubt decide that you would have to pay my legal fees, or I could pay him out of my own money." "If he told you that, then he's not a very good lawyer. Your sum isn't enough to rent an apartment, let alone pay for a lawyer." "Nonsense, Ralph. The farm is free and clear, and at $1,600 an acre, the land alone is worth $1,200, 00. 00, and you'll have to give me half that value." "In your dreams, Mary Beth. You keep forgetting about the prenup." "My lawyer says he can get it canceled." "This guy just got out of law school? You don't have a prayer, Mary Beth." And I hung up. 2 weeks later, when she and her lawyer met with me and my lawyer, a hidden landmine went off under her feet. That's when she learned that the farm didn't belong to me. It belonged to our children. I had learned some hard lessons from all the legal twists and turns I had gone through to get the property after my parents died, and I wasn't going to let a similar thing happen to my heirs if I died suddenly like my parents. I formed a limited liability corporation and placed the farm in it. The corporation had 4 officers and 3 stockholders. Me and the 3 children were the officers, and the 3 children were the shareholders. I met with the children when the youngest turned 15 and discussed everything with them. I explained why I excluded their mother. They understood my reasoning and agreed not to mention what we were doing to Mary Beth. My reasoning was that from the beginning, when great-grandfather started the farm, it was decided that she would stay in the family. This was reinforced by the fact that great-grandfather passed it on to my grandfather, who passed it on to my father, who passed it on to me in his will. If I had died an untimely death, Mary Beth would have inherited it and would probably still be young enough to remarry, at which point the farm could leave the family. I, on the other hand, did everything I could to keep the farm in the family. The decision to leave Mary Beth out of it was made to keep peace in the family. She might understand, but she might not. So why take the risk if the family was going to be frosty? At the same time, other legal documents were passed, such as the one that said that none of the share owners could sell their shares to anyone outside the family, and that all wills had to state that their shares would stay in the family. To be honest, I didn't know if any of this would survive my death, but if I had already died, I'd be out of the picture. But the highlight of that day in my attorney's conference room was that Mary Beth and her attorney now knew that they too were out of the case. Mary Beth fainted when she found this out. When she was brought to her senses, my attorney told Mary Beth and the shark, her words not mine, she had hired the rest of the bad news. Since the assets are pretty dry, I was able to expedite the process. I have us scheduled for next Tuesday for a preliminary hearing. We drew Judge Heinemann. If Mary Beth's attorney knew anything at all, he would know that Heinemann was the equivalent of a hanging judge when it came to divorces in which adultery played a role. If the perpetrator was a man, he was raped to the extent that the law in a no-fault state allowed. If the perpetrator was a woman, she got the absolute minimum that Heinemann could give. If children were involved, he was known to give custody to the father and use any technicality to avoid paying child support to the woman. I was sure that Mary Beth's attorney knew that unless a miracle happened, he would be out of luck in terms of getting a fee from me. I left the attorney's office and went back to work where I asked Amber if she wanted to celebrate with me after work, and she said she would love to. The 9 days until the preliminary hearing flew by quickly. I received 4 calls from Mary Beth asking, more like begging, me to give up on the divorce and work with her on getting us back together. During the 4th call, I asked her if she could give me one reason why I should do this, and she said, "Because you know I love you, Ralph." It was an affair, Ralph. It didn't mean anything. I got curious, and after 24 years of being with only you, I wanted to see what it would be like with another man. I just wanted to try something different. It was just a fling, and it was already on its last legs when you found out. He was starting to show possessive tendencies, and I was going to put a stop to it. Damn it, Ralph, I love you. Always have, and for 24 years I've done everything I could to prove it to you. I know you loved me, and I know that love can't just be turned off like a light switch. Don't let a stupid affair destroy 24 damn good years. Go have an affair of your own. You said you intend to sleep with Amber, so go do it. Call Alice and see if she wants to get even with Mike. We were good together, Ralph. Please don't let it end. We could have made it work if you had talked about curiosity before you started dating Mike, but you didn't, did you? To you, Mary Beth, it might have been just an affair, but to me it was pure treason. It was a stab in the back, and with a man who was supposed to be my friend. I don't see a way back for us, Mary Beth. I'm sorry, but I just don't. Take care of yourself, Mary Beth. And I hung up the phone. As I hung up, I wondered if I had done the right thing. 24 Tears had been beautiful up until the day I saw what she was doing in the barn. I had to admit the pull was there. Mary Beth was a well-known personality, while Amber remained a mystery to me. I still couldn't understand how a 24-year-old beauty could interest a 44-year-old man. I was attracted to her, of course, but could there be more to this relationship? I didn't know, but I wanted to find out, and to do that I needed a divorce. I needed to be single again. It may be old-fashioned of me, but I had made some vows, and I had always been a man of my word. Mary Beth's call planted a seed in the back of my mind. Would Alice be willing to play get even? Then there was Martha Rich. She lost Henry to cancer a little over 2 years ago, so maybe she's ready to start dating again. At the preliminary hearing, everything was clear and straightforward. A 50-50 split with the farm excluded. No alimony was awarded. The judge commented on the fact that Mary Beth was a registered nurse and that not only was County General looking for nurses, but Centura Hospital as well. Centura was 30 miles away in Overton, but the 30-mile trip was not onerous. Mary Beth's attorney insisted on scheduling court-ordered counseling, and the judge asked me how I felt about it. It would be a waste of time and money. She cheated on me, and talking for an hour a week isn't going to help her get over it. Talking might help her realize why she did it, but it would do nothing to make me believe she would never do it again. More than that, it will be a weekly reminder of what I'm trying to forget. I see your point. He put down his little wooden gavel to finalize the proceedings, and 6 months later the divorce was final. As I left the courtroom, Mary Beth was crying, and I felt a sudden urge to hug her and comfort her. This urge I successfully overcame. Next chapter. That pounding of the gavel on the table set me free as far as I could tell. It freed me, at least in my mind, from my vows, and I called Amber and asked if she wanted to celebrate with me that night, and she said she'd love to. We had a nice date and I drove her home, but when I tried to move on to a more serious relationship, she blew me off. All that happened today, Ralph, is that you are now legally separated. You will still be married until the divorce is final. I want you, Ralph, but I won't get involved with a married man. That certainly got me thinking and changed my perspective. I was at Safeway buying groceries and ran into Alice. She said she'd heard about my hearing and then asked how I was feeling. Loneliness. Something unfamiliar to me. I'm familiar with the feeling. 17 years we've been together, and suddenly I'm alone. Are you doing anything tonight? Besides watching TV? No, not really. Would you like to have dinner with me? At the Roadhouse and then maybe a drink and dance at the barnyard? I'd love to, Ralph. What time? How about I pick you up at 6:30? I'll be ready. We managed to avoid direct mention of Mike and Mary Beth at dinner, but they were a constant presence in the background as we talked about what we'd been up to lately. Alice was a financial controller. She was head over heels in her job, and her life consisted of getting up, going to work, staying late, and then coming home and falling into bed. We finished dinner and then went to the barnyard for drinks and dancing. After a few drinks, Alice got candid, and I got the whole story. After she kicked Mike out and filed for divorce, she had been dating a lot, trying to cheer herself up. The problem was that every guy who asked her out expected something more from her at the end of the night. They thought that because things were stable in my marriage, I missed her and needed her. After a dozen or so dates, I said to hell with it and stopped dating. I won't take offense if I ask why you said yes to me? Promise you won't laugh? I promise. I said yes to you for the same reason all my dates asked me out. You were married and used to getting it all the time, and I figured you'd miss it and need it. To add to that, my dates were right. I did miss it and needed it. I just didn't want to have a reputation. Besides, I wanted to get back at Mike somehow. You're an evil woman. You let me spend all that money on dinner and drinks, even though you could have opened the door when I came in and said, "Great, you're here. Let's go to the bedroom." I really didn't feel like it either, but I forced myself to have another drink and dance 3 more dances before I suggested I leave. In the car, I asked, "Your place or mine?" My place. Pulling up to her house, I asked, "Are you sure about this? You don't have any chance of making up with Mike?" Not the slightest chance. Mary Beth wasn't his first. She's just the first I'm not going to forgive him. Why won't you notice and forgive him for the others, but not this one? The others I just knew about. I didn't have a visual of the others, but Mary Beth came with pictures and sound. What about you and Mary Beth? Do you have a chance? I learned a long time ago never to say never, but it's unlikely. Unlikely but possible? I shrugged. It doesn't matter to me, babe, so come on in and let's get on with it. The next morning, she wanted me to call in sick and spend the day with her, but I told her I had some very important contracts to review and comments to submit, so there was no way I could afford to miss work. I got the feeling that Alice wanted to move on to a permanent relationship, and perhaps I might be interested in her in the future, but I wasn't interested at that point. I fully intended to pursue Amber, so a relationship with Alice was out of the question for me. But I was greedy enough to want more of Miss Alice for 6 months before the divorce became final. I had to find a balance that would suit me. I would have to accept some invitations and decline some. Seeing her enough to keep her happy, but not so often that those around us would start to consider us a couple. So when Alice asked if I was coming to dinner that night, I referred to a previous engagement. Then I dropped my hands. I had always been honest and forthright, so why would I play games with Alice? That wouldn't be the me I always thought I was. Be honest with Alice, and let the chips fall where they may. What did the wise man say? Something like, "Don't let your head get so big that you can't fit a hat on it?" Alice made us breakfast, and over scrambled eggs and bacon, Alice said, "I'm not ready for a new relationship yet. You're a really nice guy. Maybe somewhere in the future we'll work something out. I'm just not ready yet. I do want to do more of what we've been doing, but I don't want to be a couple. I don't want to be, at least not yet. Are you okay with us having a friends with benefits type relationship? Maybe once a week or so?" What can I say to that other than, I totally understand. I feel the same way. I'm not going to break up with Mary Beth until the divorce is final in 6 months, but I'd like to see you once in a while, and not just to play on the bed. How about dinner, drinks, and dancing next Friday night? I'd love to. Next chapter. Again, news travels fast in small towns. I was doing laundry around 3 in the afternoon when I got a call from Mary Beth. "I see you took my suggestion about getting revenge on Alice. Now that we're even, can I come home?" "No, Mary Beth, you can't. We're getting a divorce." "You're not thinking straight, Ralph. I love you, and you know perfectly well that I love you, and I know you love me. Getting a divorce is just silly. We ought to be together." "I'm sorry, Mary Beth, but I need a divorce." "You need one? Why?" "I told you I intended to get into bed with Amber, and in fact you even suggested I do so, if I remember correctly." "So?" "She said she wouldn't get involved with a married man, so I need to get a divorce if I want a chance to do her. Bye, Mary Beth." I hung up the phone and went back to my chores. When I finished everything I wanted to do, I decided to go into town and have dinner at Bernie's Diner. I ate, had a beer, and when I walked out to the parking lot, I found Mike sitting in the back seat of my truck. Apparently, Alice had wasted no time in letting him know that I had visited his bed and his soon-to-be ex-wife. He wasn't alone. Jimmy Farrell was with him. Jimmy and I went back to high school, and all the way from 3rd grade through high school, we didn't like each other. We fought a few times, and we were about evenly matched in the win-loss column. I guess Mike figured he could take me on with Farrell, and probably could if I let him. But I wasn't going to do that. I knew Mike well enough to know that he would want to give a speech before the game started, and I wasn't going to let him do it. I walked over to the two of them. Mike sat on the back door and looked at me with a smirk on his face, and Jimmy just stood there smiling, knowing that if the two of them went up against me, I was done for. When I got to where they thought I should stop and start talking, I put my head down and ran straight at Farrell. They didn't expect me to attack, and it took them by surprise. I headbutted Farrell in the middle of his face and broke his nose. As his hands went up to his face, I hit him with my right knee, knocking him outward, and he fell with a scream. I turned to grapple with Mike, but in my hurry to get off the back door, he stumbled and was trying to catch his balance when I got to him. I beat the snot out of him, stopping between kicks to get back up and kick Jimmy so he wouldn't fall. I leaned over and then said, "I'm sick of messing with you, asshole. You know I have a concealed carry permit, and I'm going to start using it. Next time you come after me, I'm going to shoot your sorry ass." I pinned his head to the ground, walked over to Farrell and gave him another kick in the ribs, then drove home. The next 6 months passed monotonously. Mary Beth called a couple times a week to ask if I'd come to my senses and was ready to let her go home. 2 or 3 dates a week with Amber, and at least once a week going out with Alice and getting benefits from her. Small towns being what they are, Amber didn't immediately know about my going to the benefits office and brought it up one night when we were at a dance at the VFW. I was honest with her. I'm a man used to getting entertainment on a regular basis. I have needs, and you are off limits until my divorce is final. Alice has the same needs, but she doesn't want a permanent relationship. She doesn't want a reputation, and neither of us wants emotional attachment, so we take care of each other. It works for us. Amber didn't say anything back to that, but when I drove her home that evening, the usual kiss didn't follow. I began to suspect that our relationship wouldn't last long. That feeling was reinforced, at least in my mind, when Amber seemed to be avoiding me at work on Monday. It didn't bother me as much as it could have, because the more time I spent with Amber, the less likely it was that we'd have a long-term relationship. Don't get me wrong, I would love to have a long-term relationship with Amber. She was an attractive redheaded girl and she was fun to date, but the problem was the age difference. I still couldn't understand what she was doing spending time with a man who was almost old enough to be her father. I had no illusions about myself. I looked decent and was in pretty good shape, but there was nothing special about me, and Amber had plenty of cute guys her age who were constantly trying to date her. We were from different generations. We didn't like the same music, TV shows, books, sports, or even food. She loved Oriental food, and I couldn't stand it. She liked hard rock, acid rock, and even a little rap, and I liked country western, bluegrass, and jazz. She loved golf and would go out every Sunday morning and hit the ball, and I thought it was a waste of time, just like she thought my bowling was a waste of energy. We had nothing in common. Amber was still avoiding me on Tuesday, and even if she hadn't, we wouldn't have done anything that night anyway, because Amber had to attend her literature club meeting at the library on Tuesday. Alice was in Overton visiting her sister, so I had a rare free evening and stopped by the drop-in for a couple beers after work. Around the second long neck, I realized I was in a rut. I was dating Alice because I wanted fun, and she was willing to give it. I was dating Amber because she was giving me a social life while we waited for my divorce to become final. 2 women did about 80% of what one woman used to do. True, that one stabbed me in the back, but she was a damn good woman, and I couldn't forget that. Truth be told, I missed her and the life we had. Hell, the truth was that I still loved her. She was right when she said I couldn't turn off my love like I turn off a light. What a mess. What a goddamn mess. Next chapter. When Amber started avoiding me on Wednesday, I decided something had to change. I couldn't change the fact that Amber wasn't happy that I was getting what I needed from someone else, but what I could do was remove myself from the situation where what she thought mattered. She wanted to avoid me, so I just ignored her and lived my life. To start, I picked up the phone and called Martha Rich. Her husband Henry had a gun collection, and when he died of cancer, she called me and asked if I knew anyone who could buy his guns. I gave her a list of names, but then forgot about it. Martha was a beautiful woman. I dated her in high school, and we were almost doing well until Henry transferred from another school and stole her away. Henry had been gone a long time, and I wondered if Martha was ready to take the plunge into the dating pond and used Henry's collection of weapons to start a dialogue. Yes, she still had a few guns, and I arranged to stop by her place after work. And I took it as a good sign that she had applied fresh makeup and was wearing high heel shoes when she opened the door. She showed me what she had left of Henry's collection. I was surprised to see that she still had his Colt model 1911A1 and asked what she wanted for it. Having decided to sell the collection, she had looked up information on the web, so she knew how much the gun was worth, and surprised me by offering it for about 25% less than it was worth. I told her I would take it, but only if she would have dinner with me one night that week. She smiled and said, "Pick a night, Ralph. They're all free." "Would Friday suit you?" "What time?" 6:30? "I'll be ready." "Mexican and bar court for two-step and line dancing?" "Great!" I headed home with a big smile on my face. Thursday at work went without incident. Amber took the day off and I didn't have to ignore her while she avoided me. When I got home from work, I didn't feel like going home and cooking, so I stopped by Bernie's diner to grab a bite to eat. The first thing I saw when I walked in the door was Mary Beth waiting at the tables, and I wondered when she started working. Last I heard she was serving drinks at Bud's bar. I knew how things worked at Bernie's, so when I saw Mary Beth, I knew which section she worked in and headed for another. I could have just turned around and left and gone somewhere else, but why bother? It was a small town, and while we both lived in it, we had to run into each other from time to time. It was worth getting used to. As soon as I sat down at the table, Velma came out of the kitchen, saw me, smiled, and walked over to take my order. I nodded toward Mary Beth and asked, "When did this happen?" "It's the third day now. That won't stop you from coming in?" "No, as long as I can avoid the area where she works. Though you can be sure I won't come if there's a date with me." "It's none of my business, Ralph, and I know it. But is there no chance of you two getting back together? You two were so good together." "I know we had a good time, and that's the hardest part of breaking up. But no, there's no chance." She took my order, brought me my beer, and then took my order to the kitchen. While waiting for my food, I read the sports section of the Times and watched Mary Beth out of the corner of my eye. I wanted to be ready for her to try to do something, but other than keeping her eyes on me when she wasn't dealing with customers, she didn't do anything. My food was brought to me, and I ate and chugged it down with a second beer. When I was done, I tossed a 20 on the table to cover the bill and tip, then headed for the parking lot. It was almost déjà vu. Someone was sitting on the back door. It wasn't Mike, it was Mary Beth. As I approached, she got off the porch and said, "I'm tired of talking to you on the phone. Maybe in person I can get you to come to your senses. We love each other, Ralph. Let me come home, Ralph. I need you." You need to get it into your head that divorce is a week away. Divorce is the end of a marriage. If I didn't want that end, I never would have started divorce proceedings. Get that into your head, Mary Beth. We're done. We're done. We're done. We're done. We're done. Don't waste your time telling me how much you love me, because it wasn't enough to keep you from letting Mike ruin your body. And yes, I still love you, and part of me always will, but the sight of you and Mike having fun on those hay bales is imprinted on my memory and isn't going anywhere. Every time I see you or hear your voice, that memory comes back, and I see it in my head clear as day. To keep that memory away, I have to keep you away. If you really love me, Mary Beth, stay away from me. Stay away from me and let that image die. I got in my car and drove home. Next chapter. Around lunchtime, Amber came into the office and asked, "What time are you picking me up tonight?" "Tonight? What's tonight?" "The dance at the VFW. We always go there." "Well, we're not going tonight." "Not going?" "You've been ignoring and avoiding me all week, Amber. I figured that's your way of telling me you don't want anything to do with me anymore, so I have other plans for tonight." She stood staring at me for a few seconds, and then spun on her heels and walked away. My date with Martha went well, and I kissed her on the cheek as I walked her home. I asked her if she would like to go out with me again, and she said she would love to. I was driving home in a good mood, and as I pulled up to the house, I saw a car parked next to the house. When I got closer, it was 600 feet from the house, I saw that it was Amber's car. She got out of the car and stood there waiting for me when I got out of the truck, and before I could say a word, she said, "Okay, I've been avoiding you. It was childish, but I was pissed. You were supposed to be mine and you were having fun with another woman. How do you think I was supposed to feel about that? I know it was my own fault because I decided to wait until your divorce was final, but it was still upsetting to find out you were seeing someone else. Did your date tonight leave enough for me?" "What? All right. Did your date devastate you, or can you pick it up for me?" She saw the confused look on my face and said, "Never mind. I'll find out for myself." She took my hand and began to lead me toward the house while saying, "When I'm done with you this weekend, you won't even want to look at another woman. You're my Ralph. Get used to it." Amber was right. When she was done with me that weekend, I wasn't interested in any other women. Amber and I have been a couple ever since. The day after the divorce, Amber moved in with me. My fears that the age difference would doom us before we even started were unfounded. And after 5 months together, I put a ring on her finger. When I called Alex, Melanie, and Gloria to tell them the news, all three said they wanted to attend the ceremony. When I told them it would be a simple civil ceremony, they replied that I would still need witnesses and let it be them. This worried me, as I didn't know how they would take a stepmother who was only a couple years older than them. Once again, my fears were unfounded. Gloria and Melanie arrived 3 days before the ceremony, and Gloria immediately organized a bachelorette party for herself, Amber, and Melanie, and by the time they got home, they had already bonded. All three could pass for sisters. Alex arrived the day before the wedding, and after meeting Amber, he told me privately that he was angry with me. "She's my ideal woman, Dad. You should have left her alone so I could have a chance at her." "Don't be foolish, Alexander. She's 4 years older than you." "And what are you saying? Older women and younger men are commonplace these days. In fact, you should be ashamed of yourself for robbing the cradle. She's almost the same age as my sisters." Long story short, my children approved of my choice, and 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I said yes for the second time in my life, and another 11 months later became a father for the fourth time when Alan Franklin joined Amber and me. I'll be in my 60s by the time he graduates, but so what? They say children keep their souls young. Epilogue. Mary Beth went back to work as a nurse at County General, met a doctor, and eventually married him. The marriage lasted less than 2 years. It seems the good doctor had no more use for a cheating whore than I did. Two divorced people working in the same place created friction that the hospital administration decided not to tolerate. Doctors have more influence than nurses, so because of budget cuts, Mary Beth was fired. She took a job at Centura Hospital in Overton, where she developed a relationship with another doctor. Will a third time charm her? It's too early to tell. Mike left town after Alice snubbed him after their divorce, and no one has heard from him since. Alice went on dates for a few years, but then finally met a man she thought she could settle down with. They seem to be happy together. Alice and I maintain a friendly relationship, without benefit of course, and she and Amber have become friends. All in all, the future worked out better for me than I could have imagined the day I found Mary Beth and Mike in the barn. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.